Hello, students. Welcome. Today, we're going to do a complete revision of the chapter, The Story of Village Palampur. Now, this is a very important chapter, because it helps us understand the basic ideas of production and how a rural economy functions. So, let's make sure you're fully prepared for your exams.
Okay, so let's quickly look at what we'll be covering. First, we'll get introduced to Village Palampur. Then, we'll discuss the factors of production. After that, we'll talk about farming, which is the main story here. Then, we'll see the impact of modern farming. We'll also look at how resources are distributed. And finally, we'll go over the key lessons from this chapter.
All right, let's begin with our first section. We are introducing Village Palampur, which is a model for understanding production. So, why do we study this imaginary village? Let's find out.
Now, it's very important to remember that Palampur is not a real village. It's a hypothetical, an imaginary village, but it has been created to help us understand economic concepts. You see, it's described as a well-developed village. It's well connected by roads, it has good infrastructure like electricity, schools, and even health centers. This makes it a perfect example to study different production activities.
So all these activities, whether they are farming or non-farming, what is their main purpose? Well, the main aim is production. And what is production? It's simply to produce the goods and services that we want.
Okay, moving on to our second section, the factors of production. You can think of this as the recipe for production. For any kind of production to happen, we need certain essential ingredients.
So, what are these ingredients? There are 4 requirements for production. Please remember these very carefully. The first is land, and by land we mean all natural resources. The second is labor, which is the human effort. The third is physical capital, which includes things like tools and machines. And the fourth and very important factor is human capital, that is, knowledge. Together, these 4 are known as the factors of production.
Now, let's look a little closer at physical capital, because it has 2 parts. It's important to know the difference. First, we have fixed capital. These are things that can be used for many years. Think of tools, machines, or buildings, like a tractor. The second type is working capital. This includes raw materials and money in hand. These things get used up during production, for example, seeds or cash.
Okay, so now that we know the 4 factors, let's move to our third section, farming, which is Palampur's main story. Here we will see how these factors are actually used in the main production activity of the village.
So, what is the first major challenge for the farmers in Palampur? It's that land is fixed. The land area under cultivation has not expanded since 1960. This is a core problem because you cannot just increase the amount of land available for farming.
So, this leads to a very, very important question that not just the farmers in Palampur, but farmers all over India face. How can they grow more from the same amount of land? Well, one solution is something called multiple cropping. What does this mean? It means to grow more than one crop on a piece of land during the year. For example, farmers in Palampur grow kharif crops like jawar and bajra, then they grow potato, and after that, the rabi crop, which is wheat. This is possible only because Palampur has a well-developed irrigation system, which is powered by electricity. Right, now we come to a very major turning point in Indian agriculture. Our 4th section, modern farming and its impact. We are going to talk about the Green Revolution. So, the Green Revolution, which started in the late 1960s, introduced what are known as high-yielding variety seeds, or HYV seeds. Now, how are these different from traditional seeds? Well, traditional seeds needed less irrigation and used natural manure, but their yield was relatively low. On the other hand, HYV seeds promised much higher yields, but they also needed plenty of water, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides. Yes, so this is a very interesting point. Modern farming is not just about the seeds. It is a complete package of inputs. You need the HYV seeds, you need proper irrigation, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and also farm machinery. Everything has to work together to get the best results.
And what was the result? The increase in production was dramatic. In Palampur, if you look at the wheat yield, with traditional seeds, it was about 1,300 kilograms per hectare. But with HYV seeds, it went all the way up to 3,200 kilograms. The yield more than doubled.
But while the yields increased so much, these modern farming methods also put a great deal of pressure on our natural resources. This brings us to a very serious question. Will the land sustain?
So this is a crucial point we must understand. Scientific reports show that modern farming has overused the natural resource base. there are serious environmental concerns. For example, there's a loss of soil fertility because of the increased use of chemical fertilizers. And there's also the depletion of the water table, as groundwater is used continuously for tube well irrigation. And we must remember, these environmental resources are very, very difficult to restore once they are destroyed.
Okay, let's move on to our next section, how resources are distributed. We will now see how the factors of production, land, labor, and capital are unequally distributed among the people of Palampur. As this illustrates so clearly, the land in Palampur is not distributed equally at all. Out of the 450 families, can you believe that 150 are landless? And 240 families have very small plots. Only 60 families are medium or large farmers, and they own most of the land.
This inequality leads to a lot of hardship. We can see this in the case of eVidya. She's a small farmer who needs a loan of just 3,000 rupees for her inputs. She has to borrow this money from Tejpal, who is a large farmer, and he charges her a very high interest rate of 24% for just 4 months. This often leads to small farmers getting caught in a debt trap. So this shows us a stark difference in the access to capital. The small farmers, they lack a surplus, so they are forced to borrow money at high interest rates. But the medium and large farmers, they have their own savings from selling their surplus produce, and they use these savings as capital for the next season.
All right, finally, let's look at our sixth section, Life Beyond the Farm. We will now look at the other production activities in Palampur, the non-farm activities, which are also very important for employment.
Now, although only about 25% of the working population is involved in them, activities like dairy, which is selling milk in nearby villages, or small-scale manufacturing like making jaggery or gur, and shopkeeping or transport, all of these provide crucial alternative employment opportunities for the villagers. So, as you prepare for your exams, let's quickly recap the key lessons from this chapter. Remember the 4 factors of production: land, labor, physical capital, and human capital. Understand that multiple cropping and modern farming are ways to increase production. Know that the Green Revolution increased food grain production, but it also harmed the environment. And remember that resources like land and capital are unequally distributed in villages, and that non-farm activities are crucial for rural development. I hope this helps you in your studies. I wish you the very best.